Academy, my name's Nate, by the way, I'm the co-owner of the Academy. We've been here for going on 6 years now, and kind of one of the most special and fun things that we've done since we started is doing these rotating exhibits of art here on our main floor. We have the other 2 levels and now a space next door that we'll be doing a little bit of art as well in that space, but tonight we're focused on, of course, this level with Mario's beautiful work. So again, thanks for being here. We rotate these art collections about every few months. So one thing just to note right off the bat is that if you have a favorite person or somebody that you would like to refer us to, we're always taking submissions for artists to feature. We really like to feature queer artists and people who are local to the Bay Area, not exclusively, but that's kind of what our aim is, because it's part of our community. So I have the pleasure tonight of introducing 2 people, and I'll start with Amy. So Amy DiPlacido is going to be interviewing Mario here tonight, and Amy is an independent curator, artist, and writer based here in San Francisco. She's the emerging artist columnist at Fiber Art Now magazine, and the former curator of exhibitions at San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles. She's originally from the Boston area and has made San Francisco her home for the last 7 years. When Amy's not thinking about art, she creates content in the food and beverage space under the handle The Hungry Curator. So you can follow her on Instagram. Mario Pires Cordeiro is a San Francisco-based artist born in Lisbon, Portugal. I'm going there this fall, I can't wait. He received his MFA at the University of London and completed 3 years of a PhD researching color trends in the fine arts. He's been commissioned by the Olympic and Paralympic Games Committee and the Cape Farewell Foundation and has put on several solo and group exhibitions. Mario is currently an artist at the Minnesota Street Project Studios here in San Francisco. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over and thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Nate, for having us, and the Academy. I'd like to thank the Academy. I always wanted to say that. So we're here tonight to celebrate Mario. And I just wanted to take some time to say how we know each other. So we actually met last year, of friends post-COVID, and we actually had a studio visit after our friends introduced us. And to our surprise, we realized that we were both really interested in color concepts and also color forecasting. And I had never met another artist who has been investigating this before, so it was quite a shock, and we became fast friends. So I just want to begin with talking about the title of the exhibit, which is Triptych. And if you're not in the arts, diptych is usually when there's 2. Triptych, as we can see, is 3. And I see a lot of 3s and symbolisms of that in your work. So just this piece right here, you can see that we're working a lot with the triangles, with the corduroy and the spray painting on this canvas. And we also have in this piece right over here, we have the 2-dimensional artwork. And then we also have this play with the frame where you're using spacers that are actually colored through the framer that you're working with. And then finally, we have the vinyl, which is attached to the wall. But all together creates this one piece. So you kind of have these 3 dimensions. Yep. So do you want to just take a moment to talk about the title and which is Triptych?
Yes, well, that's a lot. Thank you everyone to show up tonight. It's an honor. Thank you, Nick, for having me and for your patience and everything else. And thank you for all my friends that helped me to put this together. It's a great honor to be in such an inspiring venue and community. What was your question? It's good. So I'm terrible with titles, and I was asking, hey, what am I going to call this thing, this exhibition? Sorry, I'm not playing about. And Mike suggested actually, why don't you use the word triptych? Is so related with our work, and I did some research, and that made totally sense. Why it makes sense for multiple reasons. There's a narrative, there's a sequence, and also there's a disconstruction of that sequence, that narrative that could be viewed in different levels. maybe here this is the most conventional approach, but when we're talking about the vinyls and the frames and the artworks, so the three levels are still there, but they are articulated in a different way. So it's kind of trying to reorganize things in a not expected way, and invite viewers to challenge those things that we know, that we are more familiar with now, and color trends also play an enormous role in that. It's really difficult to work with colors, and I feel it's very comfortable when someone chooses the colors for you. So color forecasts are great because even if they present around 20 something colors combinations, and end up selecting what makes more sense to me. There's a comfort there, but more important than that is the relation with the time that we live now. What these brands tell us in terms of, hey, color trends for 2024, you guys going to be wear A, B, C, D instead of blah blah blah. And what that tells us about the society that we are on in different levels, such economical, climate change, you name it. So it's not just selecting colors, is through a collective consciousness of how we as human beings are more sensitive to certain color combinations than the others. And it's fascinating to see in the last 3 years there is no metallics. I'm not, by the way, I don't work in the color industry, and I'm trying to sell any color consultant. But that's basically my main inspiration for my work. And also challenging personal taste. What that means my references, my experiences, the travels that I did or did not. That's all layers of all this. You have to tell me to stop because I could just keep going. All right, okay, I will stop right now.
Well, you mentioned color forecasting, and it seems like a lot of people will start this process at the beginning of the year and trying to create the collective consciousness of what's going to be a prediction for next year. So is it safe to say that the color predictions post-COVID would be a little bit more subdued, and were you thinking about that? Was it really bright, post-2020, 2021? How did that shift, and were you observing that?
For me, whatever is presented by major painting suppliers is how do they come up with those studies? Where the information, what do they decide to bring to the table as a reference for those predictions, for those forecasts? And things getting very complicated in our time because the how much easier it is to produce garments, how much easier to produce paint. So what in the past used to take around 5 years to produce, now is shortened to months or weeks. So now we have color of the year, and I'm sure it will be soon color of the season or kind of, yeah. So I really don't care what colors they bring to the consumer. What I'm interested in is what the combination of colors and how that is related with our reality as a human beings. And looking back, it's fascinating to see, like, not too far, like 5 years ago, the reds, they were super bright. The greens were really greens. And now it's all more pastel. Yeah, we know. Yeah, right.
It's almost like humans trying to play God in some ways, because you're taking something beautiful that's naturally occurring and putting it into a paint chip, or trying to dilute down the year with, this is the emblematic color that represents the entire existence of humanity for 2023. So it's kind of an interesting motivation
I
of
love
students
it.
too, right?
Yeah, there's a irony
Yeah.
about that, which I really love it.
And then are you more inspired then by other visual artists and looking at art history, or are you actually more inspired by these design trends that are happening behind closed doors, would you say?
All this obsession with color started in a library in London. I was doing some research not related with color whatsoever, and I come across with this enormous catalog produced by International Color Authority. And I was like, what the hell is this? International Color Authority? Is this even a thing? And the catalog, kind of incredible production. They had all these samples of fabric and amazing. They don't do that anymore because it's so expensive, for sure. So that was the pivot moment for me. Like, what am I missing here? Like, that was a turning point. I could not see color with the same eyes anymore. Like, I couldn't see a Tupperware or, this furniture the same way, because I knew there was so many hands, decisions that were made, not just on a personal level, but also in the consumer and manipulation and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and this process is also shrouded in secrecy. We don't actually know when these meetings happen. We don't know who is actually curating the colors for us. But then it determines fashion, architecture, interior design, everything.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And also the paint, right? The way the amount of paint that is produced, it's changed. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so shifting gears a little bit, I want to, my background is obviously in textiles, and I noticed that you're working with corduroy here, and also the shape that you use, the triangle, or putting two triangles together to make a half square, it does remind me of quilting. Did that inspire you in making these works?
It did, yeah. Especially this big piece. We started 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or even more. Yeah, and you know this way better than it's like it's the structure comes from a rectangle or a square, and then it's just constructed, and here we don't have that, but we still have a suggestion of a rectangle, but is weighted into and most of these actually were found corduroy, so I had to deal with what was found, and later on I did go into a store and I choose other colors, but it started from that random response of what was available to me. And the same with the spray paint. Yeah. So there's this negotiation in my art that what I can control, what I'm looking for, but same time what things I found or they resonate, and sometimes I just keep some objects. I know that sooner or later I will be using it later, and actually this corduroy was one of them.
Great, and I have to ask, what's coming up for you this year creatively? Do you have anything on deck?
Thank you for asking the question. Yes, I'm working on my first portrait commission, which is freaking me out a lot, because as you can see, there is no single suggestion of human figure, or it's all abstract triangles. But I'm so grateful. This friend, he trusts me, and he wanted to honor his mom on his anniversary with the portrait, with the commission. So, as much as that scared me, also excites me, the challenge. That's the next project, and also I have to resolve some articulations between function and unfunction, between t-shirts and hats and apparel that I've been producing, and now it's about time to bring that to the context of installation of water sculpture.
Mm-hmm. Great. And looking around, seeing your artworks in more of a domestic space like this, do you have a hand whenever somebody purchases the artwork and they come back to the house? Are you having a hand in what that looks like, especially thinking about the vinyl and how that's placed or what's arranged? Because I feel like the environment is so important to your work.
Yeah, that's site specific, right?
Yeah.
That's a great topic. Some works they need that space. Others it's just an option. They could have different alterations. So, especially the vinyl pieces, there is a possibility of produce the vinyl on aluminium metal, which is super thin, and that will be attached to the frame. So there's a permanent articulation. But there is also the option of the vinyl can easily reproduce and install directly on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But those they cannot be changed in terms of scale.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other projects eventually, yes.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, is there anything else that you want to say before we turn it over to Q&A? All right. Are there any questions for Mario? Or any friends that want to come up and say hi?
I want to ask Mario to talk a little bit about his ceramics. He hasn't talked about his ceramics, and they're gorgeous.
Thank you. So I'm a little bit crazy, right? And there is multiple projects ongoing, including the ceramics they started last year. So as Nathan mentioned, I'm originally from Lisbon, Portugal, and you have this huge tradition in tiling, tile ceramics from North Africa, influences from Arabic world, extremely rich, to the point that it's heavy, and the idea of design a ceramic or a tile is kind of, oh my god, how am I going to deal with this 200 years history and contribute somehow for a reorganization or reinventing this thing that's been so explored. So this is actually the third series of experiments that I've been doing with the ceramics. They involve combination of laser cutters, CNC, stamps, and then clay. So the clay is just one part of the complexity of the process, and most of them three different types of glazing. Yeah.
I have a question. When we probably talked about this at one time, but the large piece here, did you sketch that on a small, like on paper before in terms of the geometry of it, or how did it develop from an idea to this really elaborate thing that we're looking at? Just like structurally, I guess.
Yeah. It started with the rectangle that was divided in three, and then for the practical reasons, right? At that time my studio wasn't big and it's still not. These sections allowed us in terms of storage and all that, but these shapes they communicate with previous works, like this. It's a detail from a painting, and sometimes you just have to listen more than acting, and for some reasons some elements they weren't resolved from previous works, they make sense, or there is a call, okay, this is about time to move forward with this section of the work that I wasn't fully happy. So it's an ongoing revisiting, rearranging previous works and bringing new things. It's like circles. But that's my practice. Other artists they have a very different relation with the practice.
Can you talk about these two pieces that seem to have works within a work?
Yeah, talking about referring triptychs. So I start with the collages, and at that time I was interested. I need to the frame, and I couldn't find a shape that would make sense for these shapes. And I was start being very curious about expanding the artwork to the idea of functions and non-functions. So the frame has a very specific purpose, which is a control environment to perpetuate the integrity of the art. Right? So it's a very specific functionality there. And my question was, what if the frame becomes an extension of the work itself? And then the next question was, is there any framer able to do this thing? And that was a huge challenge too. And I couldn't find any framer. They all said, this is going to cost you so much money. We're not even going to try. And a very good friend of mine said, hey, I have this problem. I have no idea I'm going about it. This feels right. This is the direction. And we end up finding it. A way to produce these frames using CNC machines and laser cutters. And then the framer did the primers and the paint and all that. So he started with that intention of exploring a different dimension in my work that I didn't explore before. And they're not comfortable shapes. They're not comfortable. And I want that. And then the other one is there's some moments they kind of replicate what's going on, but there's moments they're not related. It could be from a totally different family. So it's not literal, and I was interested to explore that bridge, that established between the collage, the frame, and the background. It's not that obvious, in my opinion. Oh, and the colors. So the colors that you see inside the work are, if I'm correct, from 5 years ago, but these colors are from last year. So it's almost like freezing our identity in these works through color as a collective, and what these brands, they tell us as a consumers what we're going to have in the house or not.
Thank you.
I have a question about your, kind of going by your portraiture that you're working with, your friend. I'm curious.
No.
You don't want to
I know the scale. I know that it's going to be a rectangle, because that's the size of the fireplace.
I would love to know how you are going to bring in your style and personality into something that I guess you think of a portrait. It's very traditional. So how are you going to incorporate the two?
Yeah. So
That's totally fine. You don't have to know.
no, that's great, but I cannot go there. I cannot go to that space
totally
because that is, it's challenging to deal with the creative process when you start bringing those expectations or it doesn't work. So we can have this conversation maybe in 2 months.
No pressure.
You have, maybe not everyone saw it yet, but above the door to the outside, there's this three-dimensional
That's
sculpture. Do you want to talk a little bit about that too?
That piece started again a while ago, maybe 5 years, 6 years ago, and for some reason it did not feel right. So it's been in storage for a while, and when we walked in together, when you were showing the space, I was like, I know what's going to. It was so obvious. So the space resolved it. I just brought the piece. We initially was planning to use 6, 7. We ended up using only 5 because the space didn't need more. I knew that piece has to be installed in a transition space in between where people, not a living room, not a corridor, yes, a door, where you can visualize when you walk, because it has this very cinematographic idea of perceiving three-dimensionality or two-dimensionality. Where am I looking at? In a very simple way. It's just lines and color, and how that treats with the lines. So I'm super excited with that piece actually.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you have like specific artists that are influential to you or that really catch your eye either intellectually or style-wise.
Thank you for that question. It changed over time.
Yeah.
It changed the same way as we're constantly changing. And 20 years ago, I was extremely interested about Gerardische and the painters, which I don't consider myself a painter at all, but I do use paint, but I'm not a painter. You may disagree, but currently I'm very interested in the Bay Area, the art scene here, and why is there's a it's edgy. It's not. So that's my priority, and because this is the community that I choose, and it makes totally sense for me to absorb as much as I can. And there is a few artists that I'm very excited about it. But I'm not very good with names, so I'm not even going to try go there. But yes.
Just to follow that up, then, where are your haunts that you like see
Where
in the Bay Area?
Sorry,
Where are the places that you would like say are inspirational to you in the Bay to see Bay Area artists?
Well, when I landed here, I could not get my mind around to make sense of the colors in Victorian houses.
Right.
I was like, oh my goodness, how can you put together these colors in a building right in front of your face? It took me a while, I have to be honest, it took me a while. And probably that's why I feel so comfortable here. One of the reasons is because every time you walk in, you get surprised. But that's in danger currently. It's, as we all know, the trend is now paint these incredible, beautiful Victorian houses with dark grays and blacks. And there is and if that trend keeps going, we're going to lose an identity that was created 20, 30, 40 years ago internationally in terms of the image that was recognized outside San Francisco. Colorful, all of that, so, yeah. Actually, and I'm going to be a little bit political here, it should be kind of protected somehow. We should have some, because it's a legacy that it's if it's not protected, feel like we're going to lose, because these trends are constantly changing, right? And there is moments that we have to stop, in my opinion, and see what needs to be preserved. Maybe a combination of different approaches. Yes, but the Victorian house is still right.
Well, it's fair to say that you're a professional colorist, so you could come in and say,
Oh my God, I would love
this is your new career.
I would love, yeah.
All right, any other questions for Mario? Oh, here.
I'm just curious what level, if at all, intuition plays with your color processing and the interaction with the the room or the environment?
It's like it's a training. It's like, I don't know, I've been away from the gym for a couple months, unfortunately, but more exercise, more you feel, you get the results. And this is the same. The eye learns, the brain learns what works, what doesn't. You may go back to the theory, color theory, and all of that, which since the very beginning I rejected of my career. And it was really challenging in the context of the research to ignore or to say no to all my supervisors or keep insisting color theory. You have to start from the color theory. Yeah, it's a training basically, and it's an exercise.
Great, well, thank you for being a wonderful audience. I just want to point out that we have Mario's inventory sheet too, so there's a couple floating around. And of course, see the artworks that are in the corridor as well as the parlor too. So thank you all, and thank you Mario, and me too, thank you.